Hi, I'm Roger Jenks. Welcome to Grace Institute Timeout for this month. This month I'm going to share with you a tool I think is one of the best tools that we've come across to help congregations get a sense of how they're allocating their resources and all kinds of things I think you're going to find very helpful. It really doesn't make any difference what size church you are. You can still make good use out of this. It's actually the bell curve which shows a life cycle. In the business world, this has to do with a product. You introduce a product, it gains in popularity, sells a lot, eventually it peaks like all products do, and then it starts to go downhill, and then eventually when it hits a certain point, businesses would say, we got to start a new product, and so that starts that. But I want you to find a place where you can create this same bell curve and make sure it's in a place that you can do a lot of writing, because I'm going to ask you to do a lot of writing on this. Put this bell curve in place. You need 4 up and down lines on the bell curve, and I'll explain why. I want you to list all of the groups, committees, choirs, programs that your church puts together. Now you're going to forget some things, so you have to take some time to put all these together as a list. Put all these things together, even things you wouldn't think about, dart ball leagues, baseball teams, softball leagues, anything that your church is involved with, that your people are involved with, and it gets reported or it's a part of the church programming. Sunday school classes, each and every one. Youth groups. I could name all of them, but I don't want to take all the time. You get the idea. Put everything you can think of. Now, when you get together a group of your leaders, or maybe your staff to start with, take each one of those items and to the best of your ability, place it on this life cycle curve. Just write it next to the space that you think it deserves. Now somebody is going to say, I think it's over here and it's dying. And somebody's going to say, no, I think it's still on the ascendancy. Don't spend a lot of time on that. Just put it up here. Split the difference between differences. But put everything on that curve that you can think of that your church is involved with, that takes resources, time, money, oversight, anything. Now, once you do that, and it's going to take a while for you to get that done, make sure it's in a place that somebody's not going to rip it down and throw it away right away. And I'm going to ask you to do several things that are going to be really telling for you. Here's the first one. Notice the number. Notice how many things are on that curve. Most churches don't have any idea how many things they're sponsoring. Even small churches, many small churches try to be small mega churches, and they're putting all kinds of programs together. They're doing something 3 or 4 nights a week, and they have no idea how many things are going on. Notice the number of things, and start asking yourself some hard questions such as, is this an appropriate number of things for our church to try to sustain? That's the key word here, because you can start a lot of things, but to be able to sustain them is one thing. To have the resources without burning people out is another thing. So start taking a good look at the number of things that are on that curve and say, is this an appropriate number for our church? Now, that's an eye-opener for a lot of people. Some of you watching this are going to say, I already know all that. But I'll tell you this, there are people in your leadership group that do not. There are people who are very visual. They're not auditory, they're very visual. And until they see a picture of what's going on in their church, they have no clue as to how much is actually going on. And there are people who kind of live in different sections of their church life, and they know about that area, but they don't know all this other stuff is going on. And for leaders, it's really important for them to get a visual picture of that. Now here's the second thing. I want you to look at the spread of those items. By that I mean, how many things are over on this side growing? How many are things up here that seem to have peaked? And how many things seem to be going down? Now there's some logical things about that. If you have the bulk of the things in your church that are over on the right side of the scale, one of the things you have to ask yourself is, are we trying to pump up a tire that's got a hole in it? Are we sustaining things that people have a lot of emotional investment with and they don't want to let them go? But are we doing that at the expense of doing something new to reach some new people? That's a very telling thing. Is the bulk of your stuff over here? Do you have a bulk of your things that are over on this side? We worked with a church once that they had an enormous number of things that down here in the lower left-hand corner, they were getting ready to launch. When we did this, we found out that was way too many things to try to launch at one time. You can't do a quality launch of that many things at the same time. So, are your things on the left side? Is there an even spread? Do you have a lot of things that look like they're peaking? Do you have a lot of things that look like they're starting to fall off on the other side? Because each one of those trends gives you a sense of how you ought to be allocating your time, your energy, your resources, and what's the importance for the life of your church. Now here comes maybe the hardest part. I want you to go through and I want you to put an X next to every item on this chart, regardless of where it falls, and put an X next to whatever you would consider is vision related or mission related for your church. In other words, if you can put a direct line between, okay, we have a vacation Bible school. See, there's another one you have to list. If we have a vacation Bible school, how does that carry out what you have stated and embraced as the mission of your church? If you have a softball league, in what way is that carrying out the mission? You might say, well, it has new people that come to it that never would come to church, but do those people ever come to church? And is it even structured to help them get into church life? Ask yourself the hard questions at this point, because if you have a chart full of things that you're doing that are just keeping you very, very busy, and a third of them have nothing to do with your mission, what's the logical conclusion there? Some of those things really ought to drop off, because I can guarantee if you got a third of them that are not related to your mission, this is part of the reason your church is not growing or becoming more vital. And you could reallocate those resources to help the church become better at what it really needs to be doing. So that's a hard question. Now here's one that's really helpful, and I have to tell you that if you're a staff person at a church, this is going to probably break your heart, maybe make you ask if you can go get some counseling. Put your initials, each staff person, or if you don't have more than one staff person of the church, take the key leaders that you would say are the movers and the shakers that run things at the church, and put the initials of each person next to which item on this they are primarily responsible for. When we've done this, we found out without exception that staff people or primary movers and shakers look at this and say, well, no wonder I'm tired. Because you allocate your time and you commit yourself because you care to an enormous number of things, because we just don't say no. And then we find out that we are spread so thin and gone so many nights and responsible for so many things that we're just burnt out. Now, your staff needs to take a really good look at this and say, this is too much. And sometimes it's a matter of the things need to be dropped. Sometimes it's a matter of, I cannot be the primary responsible person for this. It has to be somebody that I can oversee, but I can't be going to every one of these things. I can't be the one that everybody calls if something goes wrong at this particular event or for this particular program. So it may mean recruiting some more volunteers and mentoring some people to pick up the responsibility if you think these are critical programs. But the truth of the matter is that most churches, and I say this without equivocation, most churches are running too many things at the same time. More things than anybody ever needed. Now, there's reasons for that. Years ago, it used to be taught, it isn't true, but it used to be taught that the more programs that you could provide for your church, the more that provided at least one more door for somebody to come in and become a part of the church life. That may have been true at one time, but it hasn't been true for a long time. It just basically means we're just doing more stuff, and people are getting more tired. So again, make sure you're really honest with yourself about where you put things on the bell curve. Make sure that you're honest with yourself in terms of where you evaluate the life. You may say, boy, that's just a program I loved and it's been dear for 50 years, But if it's not, if it's on his last breaths, let it go. It's time to just drop it. And there's going to be some people that are going to be upset about that, but the life of the whole church is what's at stake. And then be sincere about this with your staff. You don't want to burn out your staff or your primary volunteers, do you? You don't want them to be just with their tongues hanging out and feeling like, I just can't do this anymore, or they move on to another church because they're just worn out. This may be the simplest technique you can use to help people see what's really going on and what needs to happen and why people feel the way they feel. It's not hard. Anybody can do this, and it's appropriate for any size church. And so I share that with you this month in hopes that you'll find that this is helpful. And if you find out that you want to pursue this a little further, give us a call. But this is something anybody can do. Just make sure you draw the lines better than I did. You have a good month. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you next month.